Welcome back to The Bulwark Goes to Hollywood. My name is Sonny Bunch. I'm culture editor at The Bulwark. And I'm very pleased to be rejoined by Ryan Fonder this week to talk about his 10 biggest fiascos in the year 2022. Biggest business fiascos in Hollywood. First off, congratulations to Ryan. New father, 3 months into the game. How's it going? How are you feeling?
3 months in, still alive. The hallucinations have faded a little bit. But yeah, things are going good. Thanks for asking, Sonny.
Congratulations. All right, so let's get enough of that sappy stuff. Let's get to the business here. We're talking about the year in fiascos. We're talking about the 10 biggest and kind of strangest and weirdest stories and how they impacted Hollywood. And it was funny to look at the first item on this list because it's something I had totally forgotten had happened this year or really at all. Neil Young versus Joe Rogan. And I like starting here because it's a really great demonstration of the fairly limited impact of any controversy that originates in social media.
Yeah, I mean, it's also just kind of the archetypal controversy of our modern age, where it combines all this stuff of, you got public health misinformation, you've got online personalities, just people who are just chronically online fighting over these things, and I think the net result of it is kind of what I think about the most, which is that in the wake of all of this, the boycotts, Joni Mitchell, Neil Young, all of his bandmates and everything, Spotify subscriptions actually increased, and we all ended up kind of sharing our Spotify Wrapped playlists at the end of the year anyway, just like the year before. So if it feels like that controversy kind of faded from the back of your mind, judging from my Twitter feed, it certainly seems like it didn't have a huge impact on Spotify's relevance as a commercial vehicle for music.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just one of these very, very funny things where you're like, I remember being very angry about that. And then, 6 months later, like, what happened? What was going on with Joe Rogan and Neil Young? It is what it is. All right, The Slap, which is back in the news now because Will Smith has his new Oscar season movie out, Emancipation. It's on Apple TV Plus. What happened there? What was the end result and the fallout?
Well, Will Smith is still banned from the ceremony for 10 years, but the apology tour has officially begun, doubling as this promotional campaign for Apple's Antoine Fuqua slavery drama Emancipation, which I think they're hoping for some awards love for. I'm not sure if they'll get it based on how things shook out with the Golden Globes and some of the sort of tertiary awards body voting. But I mean, Chris Rock seems to be doing fine. He's got a Netflix deal to do a live comedy show for them, and that should be fun. So for the beginning of the year, which I'm guessing happens pretty close to the Oscars, but I'm not inside Ted Sarando's brain right now.
Yeah, that would be good. That would be good timing. I mean, it's interesting because I have seen Emancipation. We talked about it on Across the Movie Aisle, one of my other podcasts here, this week. And the real issue with that movie, I don't think anybody's even really talking about The Slap anymore because the movie's just not good enough to be in the mix as a real Oscar contender.
Yeah, I mean, he went on the Trevor Noah show, the Daily Show, to talk about his feelings and his bottled rage and why it all happened, right? And that seemed to be the thing that really people paid attention to as far as bringing The Slap back into the news cycle. But it's kind of been this thing of oh yeah, that thing happened a year ago. Can we move on now? But no, we have to have this sort of ritual of everybody coming out of the woodwork and revisiting, sort of like Sundance movies being nominated for Oscars. It's a similar length of news and production cycle.
Yeah. It is always fun to think back to the movies that were sold, 12 months before the Oscar ceremony takes place. and see what makes it through that period of time. All right, Disney has had an interesting year. So Disney and Don't Say Gay. Walk us through that one and how it resolved.
Yeah, I mean, I think Disney and Warner Brothers Discovery have been in tight competition for most fiascoed company of 2022. But of course, this all starts, or I guess doesn't start for Disney, but sort of the biggest example is Bob Chapek not wanting Disney to become a political football, sort of forgetting that Disney is always a political football, and trying to sit out the discussion of Florida's Don't Say Gay law, which was backed by Governor Ron DeSantis. And, he managed to do the seemingly impossible, which is piss off people on the left, and maybe even more so when he backtracked, people on the right, resulting in right-wing media figures calling Disney a bunch of groomers and all that kind of thing. And I don't know. Again, I kind of look at the net result of this, which is that Chapek is out of his job now, replaced by Bob Iger at the end of the year in a pretty dramatic faction. We'll get back to it. And then, during the midterms, the governor won re-election. He's like a national figure now, and this whole tiff with Disney certainly didn't hurt.
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting one because it really does kind of like the Joe Rogan Spotify Neil Young fight, but to a much larger degree, kind of brings together all of our disparate warring factions of politics, culture, online media into one swirling pot. I still contend that Chapek had the right basic idea of just trying to stay out of it entirely and avoiding getting into it. But obviously that was not sustainable internally at Disney.
Yeah, my view on that is it's trying to think about what would have happened if Iger were there and had tried to walk the tightrope and had condemned or had just full on condemned the bill. I think something would have given DeSantis the opportunity to seize on Disney anyway. And if they had come out swinging on this, certainly, but Disney's always going to be in the spotlight or in the crosshairs with. Especially on the current version of the political right.
Yeah, it's the kind of flip side to my coin here is I do find it very funny that some folks are like, oh look, Disney went woke, they're going broke, that's why they're getting rid of the CEO. But I don't, do they remember what Bob Iger is like? Bob Iger is not a shrinking violet in terms of the political landscape. He is a pretty straightforward liberal. He's not I don't think, and he was even kind of in the background and then in the foreground saying Chapek is handling this very badly, we need to support our gay employees. It was
yeah no, Iger is a capital D Democrat and was toying with a run for president as a Democrat, so I'm not really sure what the anti-woke crowd thinks this is all about, if it's about throwing out the wokesters and bringing in some other regime that's going to go back on that. I mean, Iger's the guy who spoke out against abortion laws in Georgia, threatened to move Disney out of Georgia. Obviously, that never happened, but he was talking about it.
Yeah. All right. Next up is Wall Street turning on streaming. This is the biggest, I think, business story of the year, the shift in focus. So what's going on here with Wall Street and streaming, and how that kind of calculus has changed for some of these studios?
Well, it seemed like for the longest time, investors were looking at Netflix as kind of this miracle growth story where subscription numbers were going up. Netflix is profitable. I mean, they're throwing off money, so. They rewarded companies that imitated Netflix by boosting their stock prices. Like companies like Disney and HBO, they threw in billions of dollars in capital to produce movies and TV shows for streaming to get subscriber numbers, and it worked. And during the pandemic, especially, it worked really well because people couldn't go to movie theaters and people couldn't. There was not that much else to do, but eventually. Wall Street, I think, decided that it would be nice if these things started to make money, and are starting to see it in the results that, Disney's losing like $1 billion a quarter on its streaming platforms and doesn't really seem to have a convincing case that it's going to be profitable anytime soon, even though its projections are that it'll break even in 2024. So now Wall Street, looking at the macroeconomic environment, consumer spending, interest rates, they're looking for cash flow. And so that means that there's already a pullback on all this spending on content for streaming, and you're seeing a lot of layoffs as a result. Yeah, you're right. It's a mess. It's a huge about face. It's like a big, Lucy pulling the football moment for the business that was all in on streaming, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, you guys want us to make money on this now? Okay, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it really does. It drives home a thing that I have kind of thought and argued for a while now, which is that streaming makes sense as a way to replace revenue lost in the upcoming cord cutting era when there's going to be less money spent on rights for movies and TV shows and everything that the studios are making, but also as a replacement for DVD and Blu-ray revenue, which has obviously fallen off a cliff. People don't buy physical media anymore because they're fools and they want to get it all streaming all the time. It's bad choices for all you people out there. Buy stuff that you can hold in your hands. But it's a big shift, because they went from, all right, we're willing to lose money to grow our subscriber base, to then like shifting on a dime to like, all right, we got to make money now.
Yeah, and I don't want to like oversimplify what's going on. Like they're still spending an awful lot of money on streaming content, exclusive streaming content. But I think as you'll see in our next item, certain companies are trying to kind of transition to something that makes a little bit more economic sense in a traditional sense of the word.
All right, so let's move to the next thing. The item here is titled "Zaz Swings the Axe," and that covers a lot of stuff, because David Zaslav, who has taken over at Warner Brothers Discovery, is the CEO there. He is in the midst of a kind of radical rejiggering of what Warner Brothers means, what HBO means, what HBO Max means, what Discovery means as a channel. What is going on there, and how are they cutting those costs?
Well, when Zaz came in, and I'm using sort of the honorific Zaz for David Zaslav. He was very much like buddy Hollywood, Mr. I'm going to talk to all my friends in Hollywood and be talent friendly. That honeymoon ended pretty quick as soon as he started to get under the hood and figure out how he's going to make good on this promise to Wall Street to save $3 billion a year in costs. So he gets in there. He first of all kills CNN Plus immediately. This $300 million boondoggle for streaming online news. He goes through the movie slate, decides that streaming, big movies going straight to streaming, makes no financial sense. Kills Batgirl as this $90 million movie that was basically pretty much on the landing strip, ready to go. And talent. This is just the start of it. I mean, Gordita Chronicles from HBO Max, like they start pruning episodes of Sesame Street from the service. All kinds of stuff gets canceled, and this is a pretty radical shift from the AT&T era of Warner Media, which was the previous owner, where they were throwing everything at HBO Max to try to get it to compete directly with Netflix and Disney Plus. And then, of course, you have the layoffs at the cable networks and Warner Brothers Studios. and CNN also that are not done. This is a continuing effort by Zaslav.
Well, let's dig into a couple of things here, because I think it's interesting. I don't think people entirely understand the financials behind some of the decisions here, right? So, I think I've talked about this on the show before, but HBO Max making the decision to take off some HBO Max originals, HBO originals, like shows that they were technically licensing, right? That HBO has always paid for. So a show like Westworld, for instance, right? Westworld was just taken off of HBO Max, is going to be leaving HBO Max, right?
Yeah.
How does that save them money? I guess is the basic question that people don't understand. People think that this is some sort of like spiteful, like, oh, they're just getting rid of things. But it is an actual cost line item on the budget, right?
Yeah, it is that. It is like you have to pay residuals to your creators when you have that stuff on the air in perpetuity. The other part of it is that, I think in some of the cases of these shows, Zaslav wants to take a lot of this stuff that's just been in this HBO Max walled garden and drawing subscribers, take that content and license it to other places, TV, other streamers, Netflix, so that they're not only saving money, they're actually bringing in revenue, which is how it used to work. Sony Pictures, for example, it remains a so-called arms dealer in the business because it doesn't have its own streaming service. It sells its programming to other networks and other streamers, like including Netflix, and it's been a very profitable model for them. And so I think what Zaslav is saying is, yes, streaming is great, but it can't be the only thing that we're doing right now because it's not profitable. We have to maintain some of these business models that have actually been making us money, like licensing movies and TV shows to ostensible competitors, and especially putting movies in theaters for a long time.
Yeah, I remember somebody breaking down, the kind of thought process for licensing a show like Friends, right? It's like we can either spend $1 billion and keep Friends on HBO Max, and we'll pay for it and we'll have it there, or and try to make $1 billion worth of subscriptions on the people who are coming here just for Friends, or we can license it to Netflix or Hulu or whoever for $1 billion, and like it just the cost benefit ratio there is just off.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and I think what we're seeing right now is there was a lot of experimentation and a lot of excitement that was testing that balancing act, and now we're seeing what people do when they decide, okay, maybe that wasn't quite worth it, or maybe that didn't make all that much sense.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Sony is considered an arms dealer in this whole thing because they sold off their shares of Crackle or whatever service they have.
Right.
The Sony PlayStation Video service nobody wanted that, so they're just like, all right, fine, we'll sell it to everybody. And Sony movie Bullet Train has been like #1 on the Netflix charts in the U.S. for the last week because it's new to the service. People are watching. It was just in theaters 4 months ago. Now it's on Netflix. Everybody is watching it there, and that's just a win. I mean, that really is kind of a win for everyone. It's a win for Netflix. It's a win for Sony. And
I'd be curious if people who see that, Bullet Train is the #1 movie on Netflix right now, if they see that as a Netflix movie, or if they're even thinking about movies and TV shows in those terms. Like, I think it seems like people understand that Stranger Things is a Netflix show, but can the general public tell the difference between like something that was made specifically for Netflix, like Gray Man, for example, and Bullet Train? And I think this kind of proves the point that a lot of people have made, is that movies that do well, or even just okay in theatrical, can do really, really well on streaming. Like, those two don't cannibalize each other when the theatrical comes first. Like, it's fairly clear that theatrical is a great marketing tool for films, especially if they're big stars and you can get that on the poster. People have heard of these films, so when they come to Netflix, people watch them, and they're very valuable to both sides of that deal.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we'll see if Netflix really moves into theatrical exhibition in a strong way. The numbers on Glass Onion, the new Knives Out movie, were pretty promising, but still limited. I mean, it was only in what, 600 screens?
Yeah, 700 theaters total, and yeah, Ted Sarandos has been basically adamant, and Reed Hastings too, going out there and saying, "Look, we are not trying to build a theatrical business. Stop trying to make this happen, you people in theatrical. I know you guys want movies in your theaters, but this is our business, and we're going to do it our way." That's kind of the Netflix attitude. But that was kind of the Netflix attitude towards advertising, and now we have Netflix with ads. So.
Yeah.
Who knows?
We'll stay on Warner Brothers here for a minute for the next one. Off-screen drama. I mean, obviously, there's the Ezra Miller situation, capital S situation that is still resolving itself, and also everything that went on with Don't Worry, Darling. So what walk us through what happened with Ezra Miller and kind of where things are right now with him and The Flash and everything else.
Yeah, so Ezra Miller's been on this sort of spiral for quite a while. He was charged with felony burglary in Vermont. In October, he pled not guilty to that, we should mention. And there's been all this sort of speculation over The Flash because it's on the schedule for next year. Like, what are they going to do? How are they going to market this? Are they just going to talk around it? Warner Brothers seems pretty confident in this movie, and maybe they should be. I mean, DC movies tend to do pretty well, and they actually moved it up a week. So will the backstory matter to audiences? I think this is going to be a really interesting test of that. And then with, it's very different kind of backstage drama, but with Olivia Wilde's Don't Worry, Darling, that was kind of the ultimate, it was almost like an old fashioned, celebrity intrigue behind the scenes kind of. Are they feuding with the stars? Is the director feuding with the stars? There's like custody battles going on between Wilde and her ex Jason Sudeikis. There was this whole thing at a screening where people for a minute thought that Harry Styles had spit on Chris Pine, which turned out to be totally made up. And so it was just one of these. It was like the internet version of one of those old school behind the scenes chaos stories that was entertaining, but ultimately fairly harmless because the movie ended up doing pretty okay at the box office.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is that the movie just ended up doing okay. It didn't blow the doors off, but it also didn't crash and burn. I mean, it was right. It was what like a $30 million movie, ended up grossing about 80 to 90 worldwide. That's that's going to be okay.
Yeah, and it was on HBO Max within a couple of months. So if people wanted to see it there, I think it did fine, especially for a movie that got pretty dismal reviews.
Yeah. All right. This was a sadder story, the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard lawsuit, but it is an interesting media story as well. I mean, the ways in which Johnny Depp and Amber Heard got, obviously their own thing is controversial enough, but, the reason that this suit came about is because of an op-ed in the Washington Post, of all places.
Yeah, which should be noted, didn't mention Johnny Depp by name, but anyone who knew the backstory could probably glean what she was talking about, in terms of describing herself as a victim of abuse or survivor of abuse. And there was so much discussion of this topic throughout. There was all these legal influencers, like people on LawTube or Law Talk trying to make a name for themselves. And this just seemed to be a breeding ground for really toxic stuff, like a lot of vitriol throwing around the internet, especially at Heard. Just kind of an ugly situation, especially, not great for people who were watching this as survivors of abuse. So definitely a mess. I guess, Depp comes out of it the sensible winner with a $10 million jury verdict, but no one comes out of this looking good.
Yeah. All right, Kanye. We're headed towards the end of the year now. Kanye West, obviously.
We're getting into some dark territory here. Aren't
I
we?
feel like I feel like there are like 6 different Kanye West controversies all at once here. But what was it that damaged him the worst with everyone?
Just going full Hitler apologist, basically. And
going pro-Hitler. That's always a bad sign.
I think that was probably the nail in the coffin there. Definitely the apotheosis of this was the now infamous interview that he did on Alex Jones' show, being sort of a associate of Nick Fuentes, the well-known white nationalist voice. It certainly did not help. And, that was kind of the thing with Kanye that's interesting is it's been sort of a gradual spiral until now. Like, his views have always been hard to place. Like, and he's worn the MAGA hat. He's worn the White Lives Matter t-shirt, in a more recent example. And this was the guy who just a few years ago was telling the world that George Bush didn't care about black people. So it's been such a wild evolution for Kanye West, who now goes by Ye. And I think now for people who really loved Kanye West and loved him for his music and were sort of willing to overlook the icky weirdness of the politics, this is really a breaking point. And a lot of people that I talked to, and a lot of people that my music reporter colleagues talked to, were kind of in mourning about this whole thing, while of course being furious at Kanye for doing this.
Yeah, well, for understandable reasons.
Yeah, obviously.
Here's the story I haven't actually paid as much attention to as I probably should have, but Taylor Swift versus Ticketmaster, because I like it. There are 2 interesting stories here. One is the eternal struggle against Ticketmaster, the worst company in the world. Everybody hates Ticketmaster for good reason. But 2, there's an interesting angle here that this really only happens because there are only like 2 or 3 people like Taylor Swift in the world who can command this sort of attention and ticket demand and everything else all at the same time. So what's the story here?
Yeah, I mean, so what happened was Ticketmaster has this verified fans program where it does pre-sales for tickets, right? And there's a certain time everyone who's in the fan club goes online, and they're able to buy tickets before the plebes and the general public. So what happened was there was so much demand, and if you listen to Ticketmaster, there was a lot of bot accounts and fake accounts as well, and people without codes trying to log on, and it broke Ticketmaster. Even though Ticketmaster had apparently, according to Taylor, assured her and her team that they were able to handle the demand. Now, I look at this, you see with pre-sales, especially for things like even AMC's site during the pre-sales for Avengers Endgame, that site broke down, right? Like, high demand events will break your website often. It's just kind of a fact of life on the internet sometimes. But this was pretty. The lesson here is you just don't want Taylor Swift fans to be pissed off at you. Especially when you're already in the crosshairs for regulators. And the thing with Ticketmaster and Taylor Swift is if Taylor Swift didn't like how Ticketmaster was running its business, it's not like she can go to some other ticket seller right now, right? Like, there's pretty much one in the market that runs everything. So it's kind of a walking antitrust case, waiting to happen.
I mean, do we think that this is going to lead to is this the straw that breaks the camel's back and gets regulators to finally break Ticketmaster up?
I don't know. It's gotten some politicians pretty excited, and AOC tweeting about it, and other people trying to sort of join the bandwagon and grab a headline for criticizing Ticketmaster. But ultimately, it's going to be in the hands of regulators like the DOJ or Lena Khan's Federal Trade Commission, which in the recent months has shown itself to be pretty aggressive when it comes to blocking mergers in a way that you wouldn't have necessarily thought before based on sort of the traditional antitrust model. So breaking up the Simon Schuster Penguin Random House deal that was supposed to go through. Now they're suing to block the $69 billion acquisition of Activision Blizzard by Microsoft. So yeah, that's going to be a huge story, I think, in 2023. It's just like how the climate of antitrust changes.
Yeah.
Like, are we like, even if Disney wanted to be sold to Apple, which it does not, Bob Iger has said, even if that kind of a deal was in the offing, would it pass muster with the current regime? I mean, probably not. This might have a chilling effect on deal making. We'll have to see.
Yeah. Big story. Antitrust for 2023. All right,
Exciting
and then
stuff.
we're speaking of Disney. This is the last of the 10 fiascos. The Bob swap. We got Bob Iger's back. Bob Chapek is out. How did this happen? Because I mentioned this on another show, but the way that the final kind of push out the door for Chapek occurred was that he sounded, and again, this friend of mine, this is how he described it. He said that Bob Chapek sounded psychotic on the earnings call. Just sounded like a crazy person, just like hyping up totally inconsequential things and ignoring the big problems. And people were like, "This guy cannot be in charge of the company anymore."
It was. I covered that earnings call, and it was at a time when there was a midterm election going on, like, and yeah, the thing with covering earnings is that you kind of expect the corporate happy talk to try to cover up the even when it's a huge mess on the earnings. But the fact is that they missed on on revenue, they missed on profit, they lost $1.5 billion from their streaming services in one quarter. And I mean, he was talking as if they just won the Super Bowl. So yeah, I suspect there's something else going on there. There's been a lot of sort of Machiavellian behind the scenes stories about their CFO, Christine McCarthy, being the one who ended up being the Kingslayer, just knifing him in the back after all this. And the reality is that this was a buildup of a lot of things leading to this shakeup. One earnings report doesn't typically take out a CEO. Like, they have to be really concerned about how he's running the company, how some of the decisions have affected the brand, which is a very important thing to Disney. And just like what the strategy is. Like, you say you can get Disney Plus profitable by 2024. Show me the money. Let's prove it. And now it's Bob Iger's problem. So
yeah, that's for sure. All right, Ryan, thank you very much for being on the show. I always like to end by asking if there's anything you think folks should be. Folks should know. What should folks be looking forward to ahead in 2023 aside from antitrust? Obviously, that's the.
Ooh, 2023. So streaming consolidation is probably the safest and most boring answer that I can give. And then, I mean, I guess that relates to antitrust, because if these things want to combine or something, then they have to get approved by the government. But it's,
well, let me drill down on that for one sec. When you say streamer consolidation, do you mean beyond, like, HBO Max Discovery coming together for its own thing, or are we talking about, like, maybe somebody I don't even know who would buy who?
I mean, like the long rumored NBC Universal Paramount Global merger, which would bring together eventually Peacock and Paramount Plus. That would be interesting. This is something that people have talked about without, maybe there being so much fact behind it. But, it's that kind of thing. It's like, oh, does Disney buy Netflix or something? I don't know. Like, there's some crazy ideas out there, but never say never. It's so that's the kind of thing. Like, I was talking to Tony Vinciquerra of Sony fairly recently for an industry panel that we did that's on live on the website now, and the view from his point of view is just that there just aren't going to be a million streaming companies in the next few years. Like, it's going to consolidate into the ones that are successful. And does that mean that some of these companies give up and sort of take their streaming services offline and decide they want to be the arms dealer? Or does it mean they just combine and do mergers, acquisitions, yada, yada, yada? The bottom line is that bankers and lawyers are going to be in great shape.
That's always. That is death and taxes truism right there.
Yeah, it's very death and taxes. Yeah.
All right, Ryan, thank you for being on the show. I'll have a link in the email. You can go sign up for his email newsletter. It's great. You should do that. Always great to have him on. And congrats again on being a new father. Yay, kids.
Thanks, honey. That's the most important fiasco of all.
Yes, number one fiasco of the year for Ryan. All right, that is it for this week's show. I will be back next week with another episode of The Bulwark Goes to Hollywood. We'll see you guys then.
Inside Look at Hollywood with Michael Rosenbaum.
Let's get inside Deborah Ann Wool. If you had to choose between True Blood, Daredevil, To Do Again.
Partially because the Marvel series feel unfinished to me because we got canceled when we thought we were going to have more. Whereas True Blood, we did get to wrap it up. I knew that we were wrapping it up. I could say goodbye to everyone. I stole something from the set. I didn't get to steal anything from our Daredevil set.
Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum, wherever you listen.